heading the IDA today is LTEC alum.
Right. Yeah, he used to live across the street from me, and when his kids were little, and so he moved back and forth between the two plants. He worked in both plants, so he had very good experience that way. Well, no, he started out as a foreman, and then he became a chief inspector, and he came over here in industrial relations. Then he went back to Watervliet, and I'm not sure what job he had over there. And then he came back over here to be the head of the finishing department. And then Jack Schuster retired about the same time I did, and he took over industrial relations at that time. So that was his job. And
Industrial relations means dealing with the union.
yeah, and he was very good at that. Yeah.
So perfect setup for his time with Stanley.
Yeah, it was. No, he's a good guy. He's really a good guy.
It's with great pride for me to be celebrating this 40th anniversary of the Altec Revolve Fund and Altec, the founding of Altec Specialty Steel. We're here celebrating with past directors of the IDA and current members of the board of directors and the original management team. I think there's 5 or 6 of you guys here that were shareholders in the business, which is just fantastic, and consultants that helped this transaction happen. So I started my career, you know, at right out of college with Altec, which is it was what a learning ground for me. 22 years. I had Fred Ruff as a mentor at Watervliet. I had Jim Mitten as a mentor for many years and a good friend. I had Jack Schuster, Rocky Tata. These guys really put them all together and then throw in Stanley Starr, and my staff now realizes what a crazy person and why I'm a crazy person. I try to take the best of everyone. But now I'm here, you know, I start with Altec, and then about a year and a few months ago, I get a phone call from the county executive, and he says, would you be interested in coming to work in economic development and running the IDA? So I decided to do it. So that's the little bit about me, and I'm very happy to be here and to end my career, because this is my last job. We'll see. Managing the Altec Fund. In late 1975, the phone did ring, and Dr. Adolph Lena, general manager of the Bar Products Division of Allegheny Ludlam Steel, asked David Dawson, what can the IDA do to help this group of steel company employees who have very little money, but want to succeed in purchasing the bar division that's worth tens of millions of dollars? David says, we'll figure it out. You know, thankfully the IDA was naive enough but enthusiastically inclined to respond with a comment similar to, of course we can help you, let's get this thing going. Thus began David's efforts, and David, he was the architect of this. And thank you. And I'd like you to come up.
Tonight we're going to pause and reflect on the LTEC Loan Fund, 40 years since its creation, though there's obviously a very interesting backstory to actually get to that creation of the fund, and nobody better than you to kind of help us understand the backstory.
Well, the backstory was that Dunkirk, New York and Watervliet, New York, which is over near Albany, had a bar products division, which is a particular type of steel fabrication. They had mills in both Dunkirk and Watervliet, and Allegheny Ludlam, which was headquartered in Pittsburgh, decided it wanted to spin them off, and they couldn't really find anybody to buy them. Not making a lot of money, or seldom making money, and
This is in the early 70s.
it's in the early 70s.
Okay.
So it'd be 40 years ago, you know. Dr. Adolph Lena, who was the general manager of the Bar Products Division, called me up and he said, anything you guys could do to help us? We're trying to put together a team to buy this company. And I said, oh, sure. Oh, sure. So we went over and Bill Parment worked at the county at the time as well, and Bill was in some of the early meetings and discussions with me on what we might do, and we came up with a strategy because Allegheny Ludlam was willing to accept a certain amount of cash down, and ultimately the balance of the financing was the assumption of the unfunded liability on the pension plan. And that's where most of the cash came from, or most of the cumulative number came from, where Allegheny Ludlam said it's worth it now for us to walk away and sell it to these 35 guys who have put their money on the table to buy this business. So some of the working capital came from these 35 guys, headed up by Dr. Lena, who's now passed. He doesn't live anymore. And Jim Minton and other people who, some of which will be there tonight. We came up with a strategy using a very obscure federal fund run out of the United States Commerce Department called the Economic Development Administration. And it was regionally run out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania by a guy named Jack Corrigan. And Jack was an extraordinary guy. And he had just been given authority to loan or grant funds for distressed communities that had distressed businesses, that had a business plan that could stand the test of time as far as possibly existing after the fact if the federal government came in and provided some resource. So I put together a grant application, or a loan grant application, and Joe Girassi was county executive at the time, and I got him to sign off on it, and it was for $10 million. And we submitted that to EDA, went down and had our negotiations with them, with Jack Corrigan, and I was looking for a $5 million grant and a $5 million loan. And he said, no, it's going to have to be a $10 million grant. I said, okay. That's okay, Jack. That'd be fine. And so obviously there was a lot more paperwork to do, and there was a lot more discussions about the overall package. There had to be sign off by any number of people in Jack's organization, in the Commerce Department. It was the single largest grant at that time for a project of this kind in the United States. And so we were breaking new ground. And the other unique feature of it is that we got to keep the money and we got to put it into a revolving loan fund as Altech paid it back. We got the grant, Altech got it as a loan. And Altech paid us back, and that money went into a fund which were then used to loan to other companies trying to do what their vision was as far as what they were trying to accomplish. And of course it's been used literally hundreds of times now over the years for any number of businesses in this county.
Financial leadership and creativity along with David in creating this revolving loan, and Marvin ensured that this loan was paid back, that full $10 million through to very tough times was paid back in full, and hence we keep giving money out, and we are the bank of last resort if anyone needs money. Creativity. Thank you very much, my friend.
I got an interview with Allegheny Ludlam. I had 9 interviews with Allegheny Ludlam. I went anywhere from the chief executive officer to the past chief executive officer to Adolph Lena and Tom Gorman up here, and their personnel man, some of their financial people, and I had a choice. If I came, I could help the bar division, arrange the financing because they were having troubles, and and also be on the bargaining team to buy, because they didn't feel it was proper to have such an imbalance of bargaining power that they had versus the bar division. They didn't really have a strong financial person up here at the time. Or I could become president of their service centers, which was Good Steel, was called Good Steel, which had the specialty metal shop up here. It's still here. And ultimately, I decided to stick with Altec, and that's how that all started. To make a long story short, the recession was coming into play, and Allegheny, Ludlam, their officers did not think that the bar division could survive because they were losing their shirt. And they hadn't, but as I say, they were only profitable 1 year. In the recession, they were losing money hand over fist. And as a result, they felt sorry for, they really wanted to close it down. And the reason, because they couldn't sell it. Who was going to buy it? ESOTs were coming into play around that time. And we had a lot of good people, and it takes all kinds of abilities to run a steel plant. It's the abilities that you wouldn't believe, whether it's a carpenter, electricians, maintenance people, purchasing people, marketing people. It takes a cross section that makes any business, but it's so big and so fast that you need all those disciplines. No one knows all the things that are necessary to run a business of that size. So that they just thought it was going to be a disaster, that we wouldn't last months. They wanted to pull out. And Adolph and Tom and I, we were the bargaining team. So we decided to, in the negotiations, we convinced them somehow to continue. So that was one object. So it's because they never thought they'd get paid by the management that was here and what have you. Not because they were distrusted, but they didn't think they think they'd go belly up right away, and they didn't want a black mark. They really had a conscience for the community, quite frankly, and that's what happened. So we had to fight that battle. The second battle was, how are we ever going to get financing? And thirdly, with Dave Dawson's help, who was a very big help, I classify Dave as a really nice person and a marketing person. He had a great personality, and he had an engine that wouldn't stop, and a really nice, and he really wanted to help. And so the first application that we did for funds from the government came back. And the reason that it came back is they couldn't see arranging finance for such a small area, because it came from Chautauqua County. And so I was meeting with the government, and I suggested to them, I said, why limit it to Chautauqua County? Well, we're New York State. And And they thought about it, and they said, gee, well, we only have $64 million. This was the EDA, which is the, the Economic Development Administration. And we only have $64 million for the whole United States, so we can't do that. And we were looking for a grant of $10 million for them, from them. And they said, well, we can't, 10 million out of 64 million for the New York State? No way. He said, what we'd like to do is we'll give you a few million, and then we have more money because we can get about a multiple of 10 if we give money rather than give you a grant. We get 10 times this knockout power. They grant us $10 million. This is after long hours, and you know as well as I do, when you're dealing with the government, there's a lot of ups and downs, and nothing's final until it's done.
Right.
And that's true of business too. So they had to figure out the vehicle, how they're going to do that. 40%, I go back to the grant, in which the first 2 years we had to pay interest only. Now the interest only, those dollars were to go somewhere. So New York State did not have a conduct to put that in. They decided, well, we'll put the money in the Commerce Department. That's where it all started. So that was the first, and then those dollars, 40% of those dollars, that were like a trust. So 40% of that would go to Albany, to the Albany area, and 60% would come to Dunkirk. And that was the first time in New York history that they ever had anything of that nature. That was to be the seed money for the areas. So all the monies that were paid back would go into supplying the seed money for startups and to attract more business into the areas. And that's really what happened. But what it really shows is that if you have teamwork from the government, the private sector, and your workers and your employees, what you end up with, you end up with a winning team.
The longest tenured president, CEO of Altec. Yeah. Thank you for all.
Thank you very much.
We had 2 plants. We had the Watervliet plant where we melted and did our primary operations, and we also had a seamless extrusion press over there making seamless tubing and shapes. And then Dunkirk was, the billets would come over from Watervliet and we'd roll them on, we had 4 mills here, and into shapes, and then we'd cold finish them into bars and wire products. And when I came up here, Dick Simmons, who went on to become the big guru of Allegheny Ludlam, he was the general manager here, and he commissioned me to do a study to combine the inside sales function called customer service and the production control function, which include traffic and a lot of other things, and put it into one department. And he was dissatisfied with the 2 department managers that he had, so he made me the department manager. So I ended up being the youngest department manager in the history of the company. So I ran this big department, which was basically all the inside work. So when 1971 came and we formed the bar division, and that's when Adolph Lena came up as the general manager, replacing Simmons. And so we were doing this, and then Allegheny approached us to buy it. in '75. This guy Buckley that ran Allegheny International at that time wanted out of the steel business, so he sold us first, and then he sold the flat roll plants to Dick Simmons and his management team later on. So they were not enamored with being in the steel business. Well, at that time, and it ended up being the 5 officers that started the company were Adolph Lena. Tom Gorman was the, at that time, executive vice president. Jim Murphy, who lived in Pittsburgh, was the head of sales. And Marvin Hine was the head of finance. They had brought him in from Washington Steel, and or maybe Jessup Steel, I'm not sure, one of the 2 companies. And and I was the vice president of administration. So, and the 5 of us were directors. We had a director from Allegheny International on our board also, because we did owe them some money. So we went to the top 35 people in the company, and we all invested money in varying stages, and we set it up based on where you were in the company, how many shares you were able to buy. Yep. So I didn't max out because I didn't have enough money, because I borrowed a lot of money just to do what we did.
Did you see Did you see it from your perspective that this could really go?
Oh yeah, we always felt it could. I mean, it was tough because of having 2 plants. I mean, that was the biggest detriment. You look back on things, but you go back to the original Allegheny Ludlam concept. The Ludlam Steel Corporation was based in Watervliet, and that was their headquarters. And those guys used to ride, when they merged the 2 companies, used to ride a private rail car every Sunday night down to Pittsburgh, and every Friday night the private rail car would come back. And so, and they all lived in this compound in the Menands area of Watervliet. So they made a decision, and I don't know when they made it, to put the new melt shop in Watervliet. And when they did that, it really made all we did was make trucking companies wealthy. I mean, we were spending at that time, and it was big bucks in those days, at least $1 million a year transporting steel across. We transfer the billets over here, and we transfer scrap back, and for remelting. So that made it very, very difficult. Finally took over August of '76, and then we kept it going all the way till to '97, so that's 21 years. That it could have been closed down if we hadn't bought it. So we got 21 years out of it, and now with the restructured union contract they have over there, and different work rules and so on, they're doing okay, I guess. That was really one of the side benefits, other than keeping the place going and employing a lot of people. It was that fund has helped a lot of people in Chautauqua County. We went through some pretty tough times after we sold the company to GATX. Then they sold the company to Rio Algo Mines, and we got hooked in with the Canadians. And then they sold it to the Koreans. And I survived all 3 owners, and it was a great adventure till the end, and it was really sad that the company did go bankrupt, but unfortunately we had some incompetent owners.
Jim always calls it.
But I'm so very pleased that the Dunkirk plant has continued to operate. And that's really been a phenomenal thing to happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. A lot of good, but it lasted 21 years. I guess one of the things, again, it's about me again. In 1997, I was called in by Jen Park, who was one of the Koreans. He was, I considered a good guy because he helped save it at the time. Jim's looking at me, can't say. When I say the Korean's a good guy. When I say good, I mean the owners of the people that are associated. So he said, I have good news for you. Jack Schuster's retiring, and I would like you to replace him. So I became vice president. He said, I have bad news, we're filing for bankruptcy tomorrow. And then we meet with Bill Brown, a partner of Greg's, and he said, yeah, this will probably only last 10 days because we got a restraining order against the Crayons, right? But you'll probably lose your job in 10 days. So I went home and told my family that I got good news and I got bad news. That's a true story. And Nelson knows. We fought the fight, and the 10 days went to 30 days, and then the 30 days went to 60 days, and then they went away, and we continued on. And 2 years later, we came out of Chapter 11, and Nelson and I got fired. So thank you, everyone, for being here. I really appreciate it.